Very much, Mdu, and a very, very warm welcome to all our friends from South Africa, from around the world, and it is really beautiful to see so many fantastic friends. Our colleague, the director of the Durban Holocaust and Genocide Center, Mary Kluk, is here. Our friends from all around the world, Stephen Muir, Jonathan Weber, I saw Kelly, I saw Dan Reef coming from the US. I saw so many beautiful friends joining us. And I'm sure that many will not join us for the first time, as Mdu said. It is especially wonderful to welcome our Holocaust survivors. And we have Maud and Pinchas, both joining us from Canada and the United States. And it is always so special to have Holocaust survivors with us. And of course, also teachers and educators and colleagues and many dear friends of the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center. Chag Sameach to all our Jewish friends. This is Hanukkah, so we wish you all a wonderful, happy holidays still, and happy holidays for all our other friends. Christmas, New Year, as this is our last webinar of the year. And 2020 was certainly a year of many new starts. In March, when South Africa went into our lockdown, very quickly, we went online. The webinar started already in April, and we never looked back. Since April, May, every week, almost every week, we had a webinar about Holocaust, about genocide, about human rights, and variety of voices, variety of speakers, and many virtual tours that proved to be really, really popular. And we also forged new partnerships. And it gives me great pleasure that our last webinar of 2020 is with one of those new partnerships that we forged. And this is with our partners from Festival in Krakow. And we did already one virtual tour of Kazimierz. Today it will be about Podgórze, and we will start 2021 with another virtual tour of the Plaszow concentration camp site. And as you saw from the first tour, it's a virtual tour with a difference, because it engages us critically to think about memory, to think about the past, but also to think about the present and think about the future of many of those sites in Holocaust history. So taking us through the journey today is Ola, Alexandra, Janusz, which I will introduce to you now officially. Ola is a researcher and curator of cultural programs and graduate of doctoral studies in anthropology at the Jagiellonian University. In her academic work, she focuses on the memory of the Holocaust and its material traces in the landscape of Poland. She's a co-founder of Museum Lab training program for Polish heritage professionals, head of the Open Culture Studio, and board member of Centrum Cyfrowe, co-founder of Museo dla Klimatu Initiative, Museums for Climate, and co-curator of Exercising Modernity Academy. She also worked with Festival, and she will be here with our partners today or tonight. Please remember to post your comments, thoughts, or questions during the tour, and post it in the chat box as we go along. And after the tour, we will open for discussion as well as question and answer session. Ola, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy and honored to be here with you today. And let us begin.
So as you already know, my name is Alexandra Janus, and I'm going to take you for a walk around Podgórze, the district of Krakow, which is also my birthplace. As a researcher and curator of cultural programs, I'm interested in memory and the ways in which it manifests itself in space, the space of cities, but also little villages, mostly in Poland, but also in social life. And I'm not entirely sure what was the first, my interests that resulted in this tour, or maybe the place where I was born that defined and shaped who I am and what I'm drawn to. Who knows what places can actually do to people? We tend to think that they are just passive structures we inhabit, while they are quietly influencing our lives in ways we can't even imagine. The title of this walk was taken from a press article published in 1914 in Krakow, commenting on the incorporation of once separate city of Podgórze into a larger city of Krakow. I found it fascinating to look at the district not through the lenses of its history in general, but more through the lenses of its becoming, its transitions, its focusing, its different phases of development, also focusing on what was there not to be. So please join me for the walk. We start this walk with a bridge. This is SILESIAN UPRISERS Bridge. It divides once a separate city of Podgórze from the rest of the city of Krakow, especially the former Jewish district, Kazimierz, located on the other side of the river. On one side of the river, on the right-hand side, we have Podgórze, and the bridge connects two parts. It used to connect the city, and now it is also connected with the Kazimierz, with a pedestrian bridge that opened up the district of Podgórze to tourists, but also inhabitants of Krakow. But the river and bridges are also crucial for this tour because it's exactly these are the same bridges that Jews taken when they were relocated to the ghetto that was established in Podgórze in 1941. So the area that you see now, this is part of the former Jewish ghetto in Krakow. The ghetto was established in March 1941, and it was first inhabited by 15,000 people, later 20,000 people. You can imagine that this area was originally inhabited by approximately 3,000 people before the ghetto was established. So after the establishment of the ghetto, people like first 15,000 and then 20,000 people moved into an area of 15 streets, 320 houses, and around a little bit more than 3,000 rooms. The square that we are now entering into is a ghetto heroes square. It commemorates the ghetto that was operating here between 1941 and 1943. This square is in fact a big monument to the ghetto history. This is exactly the place where people were gathered to be executed and sent to death camps. And the chairs on the square commemorate that things that were left over, but those who were gone. We can look at this, at how the district looks like today for a minute and look around to see how it has changed. Now we're heading towards Eagle Pharmacy. The Eagle Pharmacy is one of the branches of the Museum of Krakow. It commemorates a pharmacist, Tadeusz Pankiewicz, who used to run a pharmacy in this building and is remembered for the help and shelter he provided for the Jewish inhabitants of the ghetto. So this building and this place tells the story of help. But there is another story that could be told in this square and in this place. In this building that you see now, the building located at Piwna 27th Street, this used to be a contact point of the Jewish Combat Organization, and a military conspiratory organization aimed at fighting the oppressors. There are no visible signs of this history of this building inside or outside it, but this building is kind of material witness to the history of the ghetto and the Holocaust in Krakow. And it's a material witness, one of many material witnesses that are still present and still there in the space of Podgórze. As you can see, as we go up, there is also another building, a new one, standing just next to it. This is a sign of the new developments that are happening in the district. As you can see, it's this like new blocks of flats and new apartments are going further along the Piwna Street, but also along the line of the river that we just saw a few minutes ago. This is a sign of some new developments happening in the district after the district was connected with the rest of the city with a pedestrian bridge that we saw at the beginning, and now we can see that in our left-hand side. So the district is changing, and it's quite new because, like, for a long time after the war, this part of the city was kind of neglected and forgotten. For Podgórze, the ghetto, the history of the ghetto, the tragic experience of the Holocaust was a turning point. And after the war, this wasn't an attractive place that people wanted to go to. It was kind of left behind. And now it's kind of like coming back to its new life, being attractive for tourists, inhabitants of Krakow, and newcomers, and also some investors. So we see that the social tissue and also the urban tissue of the district is heavily changing. And this provokes many questions about how this area should be developed further, how to find balance between memory and contemporary needs of the inhabitants, how to find balance between past and the present, and also in what directions and what ways should we shape the future. There are some tensions also happening around that subject. Some people claiming that the district should be focused more on what's new and what's coming. Some expect it to be more focused on the past and the difficult history. This building on the corner that we see now, this is a building that has one of the oldest clubs or bars functioning on this side of the river, and it was here long before the district became so popular as it is now. This place is on the ground level. It's called drukarnia, which in Polish means printing house. But as we come closer, you might be able to see that there is another sign above the door. It says Barucha, which means, which refers to a name Baruch, who used to own the store before the war that was located in this space. It was a Jewish man who was the owner of the store. Now this place is a bar that is visited by many people, also tourists coming from all parts of the world to Krakow. I've mentioned the name Baruch, and the owner of the store that we just saw, the store that used to be there, was called Baruch, but this was a famous name in Podgórze. There was another Jewish inhabitant of Podgórze, Maurycy Baruch, who was an entrepreneur, and he owned many industrial facilities in the district. Because Podgórze used to be an industrial city, a place to do business, so it attracted businessmen like Baruch. And it was a very welcoming and also diverse city. It encouraged its inhabitants to get involved and be active citizens. And this included even the fact that if you were an active citizen of Podgórze, you could receive an aristocratic title for being involved and active in making the city a better place. But it was also a place welcoming in a sense that it was easy to acquire property here. The city was very supportive towards new developments and new industrial developments in the area. This was a young and progressive city in comparison to the neighboring city of Krakow. But after the merger with Krakow, it kind of began to lose its speed. And the history of the Second World War and the ghetto was a major turning point in the history of this area. And after the war, as I said, it remained a bit neglected and left behind. So that's why we started with the bridges and with the ghetto, because from my perspective and in this walk, this was a major turning point that changed the history of this area. And now we're going to walk from the Ghetto Hero Square that we already visited towards the main market square of once separate independent city of Podgórze. So this square that you see, this is the main market square of Podgórze, once the main market square of the independent city of Podgórze. The city has two main market square. We've already visited both of them. One is now today the Ghetto Hero Square, and this is the other one. But the whole city of Podgórze, I think, had around 57 squares. Today, this is a place where people just pass by or come to hang out. When I was a little child growing up here, I thought this church that you see there, St. Joseph's Church, is the same building that you can see in the Walt Disney logo. And this is also a place that's very significant also in the context of the history of the ghetto in Krakow, because this is exactly where one of the gates to the ghetto was located. After the ghetto was established in 1941, it was first fenced with the barbed wire. After that, the wall was erected, and you can see how in a very uncanny way, the shape of the wall resembles Jewish tombstones. And the building on the right from the gate that you can see on your right-hand side used to be a headquarters of a Judenrat, so Jewish council imposed by Nazi Germany on Jewish communities. Before the war and today, it is one of the buildings of the town hall. But on the side of the building, you can also see there is a ghetto trail that guides tourists and people who come to Krakow towards different sites related to the Jewish history of the city and the ghetto history. And this is one of the material remains of the ghetto. This is the remaining part of the ghetto wall that is still there. You can see its shape as we just saw on the archival picture. There is another one that we can see now. It's located in the other part of the area. There is a sign explaining what it is, so that people who pass by or stop by can read what this material remain of the past is. And the interesting part of the wall that we just saw as the first one is located, it's much more hidden. It's located on the courtyard of the high school. And as you can see, it's located just next to the playground. And I feel like this place reveals a lot about the district as a whole. There is a ghetto wall and the playground next to each other, life and death, past with its horror and present with its everyday needs, and behind, there is wonderful topography of Podgórze with the limestone rocks and the rocky slopes. When I think of material remains of the difficult past, I often think about the term difficult heritage. It's significant for me in my research as well, because heritage usually is associated with something magnificent, something that we feel we can be proud of, something reminding us of our most glorious past. But this type of heritage, like the remaining parts of the ghetto wall, are difficult heritage. This is the heritage that sometimes is problematic or painful. And as the author of the term difficult heritage, a British scholar, says, it opens up social divisions. As soon as you want to do something with it, you want to commemorate it or erase it, change something in the close proximity of such places, it creates tensions or conflicts. And this type of tensions and conflicts are very much present in the city and urban space of Podgórze. And we're gonna visit some places and also talk about it more in a minute. So I think this is an important term for me to think about these spaces and material remains of the difficult past as something that is obviously part of our heritage, but sometimes it's being contested, or sometimes it's just like difficult for people to live just next to it, or like difficult to decide what and how should be done with it, so that it stays as an integral part of the district or of our cities. But at the same time, it's there is balance between past and present and memory and contemporary needs that I've mentioned at the beginning of this walk. So let's walk further. There are other material witnesses of the ghetto history and also of the pre-war Jewish life in Podgórze that are still there. Like this building that you can see on the right. As you can see already, It stands out if you look at it, and it's very different from the buildings just next to it. It's no surprise because this building used to be a synagogue. This was a super synagogue. And unfortunately, during the war, the interior of the building was devastated by the Nazis. After that, it performed different functions. It was handed over to professional training center. It was used as a factory and as a warehouse until it was purchased by the Starmack Gallery at the end of the 90s. And after its renovation, the main seat of the gallery is located here. So the function of the building completely changed. And I think this is very characteristic for the landscape of Poland. We have former synagogues, former prayer houses, former bathhouses that no longer performs original functions because the people who used to use them are also gone. So this is another material witness of the not necessarily the history of the ghetto, but of also pre-war Jewish life in Krakow and in Podgórze. And now we're walking to another place. It's just next to the street we just visited. And this is another important material witness to the ghetto history. The building that we are coming to used to be a Jewish orphanage. An orphanage that was functioning here during the war. And there were two buildings where the Jewish orphanage was located. The other one, the other building is not existing anymore. It was located on Józefińska Street, and it is now commemorated. This building used to be a place where Jewish children lived until the tragic history of the ghetto ended. Today, the building is in private hands, and now it's undergoing a major renovation. There are very little signs of its history, but the tragic history of children in the ghetto ended in 1942, when the children were executed and deported to various death camps, accompanied by the orphanage employees, among them David Kurtzman and Anna Regina Bewerstein. The orphanage as an institution was established in the 19th century by religious Jewish women. And it was an institution that owns different buildings and properties around the city. There is this small plaque remaining us about the history of the building and about the fact that actually Jewish orphanage was located in that building. Another plaque is located inside, so you have to go inside, you have to go through the main gate and enter the building to see another bigger plaque that says that this building was a donation to the Institution of Jewish Orphanage by Amalia Wasserbergowa, so a Jewish woman. And I think like when we discuss this material witnesses to the Holocaust and also material heritage related to the Holocaust, it always reminds me of a project by a photographer, Polish photographer Wojciech Wilczyk, who travels across Poland photographing buildings that once were synagogues. He called his book with these photographs, "There is no such thing as an innocent eye." And I think this is an interesting title, but I also think there is such thing like a trained or untrained eye. And I feel that if you train your eyes while you're in Poland to spot, seek, and trace the material traces of the history of Jewish history in Poland and also the history of the Holocaust, suddenly you start to notice that there are many places, buildings, or another elements of architecture and urban tissue that somehow stand out, that there are places that you look at them and you see that there's something off about them, that maybe they don't fit into the contemporary tissue, urban tissue of the area, or they provoke questions. And when I travel across Poland as a researcher, I also visit places. I visit places where there used to be Jewish, or still are Jewish cemeteries, or burial sites of the Jewish victims of the Holocaust. And I've learned that when you enter a village or a town, and when you look around, if you're careful enough and if your eyes are well trained, you can spot these spaces and places that provokes questions. And when you dig deeper, usually you can find some information about the Jewish past of the inhabitants of the area. So, and I feel also that my eyes, in a sense, started to be trained in the urban space of Podgórze when I was born and when I spent and where I spent my childhood. Now we are back at the Podgórze main market square that we already visited. And now from here, we're gonna go up topographically. So we're gonna go up the hill, but we're gonna also be traveling a bit backwards in time because we're gonna be visiting places that are related to the most distant past of Podgórze and the whole area. What you see now, the green area, is it's a space with amazing villas and the gardens and also a park. This used to be part of a project of transforming Podgórze, once an industrial city, into a garden city. This bold vision is very typical for modernism and the bold visions of modernity that was aiming at transforming the way we live and the way we inhabit our cities and was aiming at creating new man. This is Bednarski Park. It is named after Wojciech Bednarski, who was an activist, and we probably would call him today a city or a social activist, who created this park at the bottom of a former quarry. So the inhabitants of Podgórze wanted to transform the city into this modern, visionary place, but they didn't know back then that the much darker side of modernity was already on the way, and that it would change the city that they had tried to reshape into something radically contradicting their vision. However, there is an echo of that idea just next to the stadium that you just saw and the park. This is a contemporary community garden that is created by the inhabitants of Podgórze, encouraging people to come together and be together in the green. And here you can see how the park and the area used to look like at the end of 19th century. It was very different back then. And they were dreaming of something impressive, something big and new life. And it was a very progressive vision of the garden city. And you can still see the villas and the gardens that reminds us of that period of the development of the city. And the garden city was located on the Lasota Hill, so the hill that we were climbing up when we were going from the church. And coming through that garden city part, we are entering another amazing green space in Podgórze, where you can see this like vast green meadow that is located kind of like on the upper floor of the district. And this is St. Benedict's Church. It's one of the oldest and the smallest church in the whole city of Krakow. That has many churches, by the way. It was built at the beginning of the 11th century, probably on the site of a previous temple. And the name of Saint Benedict was probably chosen as a patron of the church in an exercising gesture, which refers to the fight against pagan rituals that could have been held in the area. And you can see how the area used to look like before, a long time before the history of the ghetto. And now you can see it's completely overgrown by nature. So it has changed completely. The church and the neighboring buildings are kind of hidden in the green vegetation. But it wasn't that hidden back then. You can see this is a picture from the 19th century. This was a place where people used to come to gather. And this was related to the celebrations of Rękawka, which is a holiday that is still being celebrated in Krakow around Easter, that has pre-Christian roots and is deeply connected with the history of that site. Researchers say that Rękawka was a pagan celebration, somehow related also to the topic, to the subject of the dead. So this part of the city, now empty and located on the like upper hidden floor of the district, used to be very densely crowded during the celebrations of Rękawka, and also used to gather many people. It was also well exposed, and the church and the neighboring buildings were overlooking the district. Now it's kind of forgotten or left behind. Along with this building, just next to the church, this is Fort Benedict. It is a building that was built in the mid 19th century for defensive purposes. Today, the building, as you can see, is lost in dense vegetation. And you can compare it with how it used to look before that. It was really exposed and dominating the landscape, overlooking the whole district. And you can see the little church on the left-hand side of this archival picture. And the fort that you can see, the St. Benedict fort, has been used also for housing purposes. It's kind of unbelievable, but people used to inhabit this building in different parts of the 20th century. Now it is considered like a historical building, and it's being protected. It's also overgrown completely by nature, so you can see how natural succession it's very recent here. And in a sense, the whole hill, as you can see now, as we are going further from the fort, is somehow taken over by nature. But this place is also very important because of its relationship to the most popular, probably, visual representation of the history of the war and the Holocaust in Krakow. And I mean by that the film by Steven Spielberg called The Schindler's List, because this site is one of the film locations. It is here where one of the some of the scenes of the Schindler's List were filmed. Maybe you remember this scene, Oskar Schindler, during the horse rides. He looks down at the district and he sees the liquidation of the Krakow ghetto. And as you can see now, he sees people being thrown out of their houses, and along with their belongings, people being shot on the street. If you have seen The Schindler's List, and I'm sure many of you have seen that movie, you might recognize this scene. So this is from where this scene was filmed. And as you can see now, to actually see these buildings, we have to go up, as we just did, and look down the city from air. And there's another interesting building just next to the buildings that we just visited and we just saw. And this building is one of the newest branches of the Museum of City of Krakow. This is Museum of Podgórze. And it is an interesting museum because it was created with the huge involvement of the local community and also local activists. When I was interviewing the people who were involved in its creation, I found it fascinating that they felt they want to have the museum so that they can take care for Podgórze and their district, so that tourists are visitors here, not hosts. And they very much refer to Kazimierz, so the former Jewish district of Krakow, that it is considered to be heavily gentrified. And they feel they need a museum, and also they need agency to protect their district from becoming a place where where it's almost impossible to live. As you can see, the whole district is changing, and these changes are unstoppable. But at the same time, I feel what the activists aimed at is protecting some parts of the district. Also, the green areas that you can see now in front of our eyes, and we're gonna enter them in a moment. I think it's interesting that we tend to think of nature as primal, preceding urban developments and man-made stuff. But sometimes it happens the other way around. The nature takes over places abandoned by people and overgrows it, so that they look like nothing was there before, like the places where you can start over. In a way, nature has taken over and overgrown the Lasota Hill that we just visited. But I think it's also interesting that, in a sense, nature also protects certain material traces of the past in a way that we tend to underestimate. And I see that when I travel across Poland, and when I search and try to locate and study uncommemorated, unmarked graves of the Jewish victims of the Holocaust, these sites usually seem to be left behind and neglected, but very often they are protected by nature. And this also happened to me when I was doing my research at the site of the former death camp in Sobibór in Poland. I realized that the nature that overgrown the site of the camp also protected the material traces of the camp that were still there, however invisible to the human naked eye. So in a sense, I think that nature sometimes works as a living archive or living excavation that contains certain knowledge that is hidden in the landscape. And sometimes these spaces seem empty, but they are not empty at all. And as we're gonna go to one of our last stops in this walk, you're gonna see exactly what I have in mind when I say that. So from the vast green meadow that we just visited, we can take the pedestrian bridge that you can see below and go to another part of this hill, which has this very significant point in the topography. This little hill is Krakus Mound. It is a mound that is a mystery because we don't know exactly who created it and for what purposes. Probably it was related to the pre-Christian rituals that I mentioned to you already. You can see on the archival pictures how different it used to look in the past. And you can also see in this picture the industrial characteristic of the area that I've mentioned already. So this mound was dominating the landscape. And in the 30s, there were archaeological excavations done in the mound because people wanted to solve the mystery of this place. They found some material objects and some human remains. They were able to uncover the structure of the mound, but actually they didn't solve the mystery of the purpose for which it was built, and also its creators. From the Mound, which is now a popular leisure area in the city of Krakow, we look down at the Liban Quarry. This is a former limestone quarry that was owned by the Jewish entrepreneur called Bernard Liban, whose company functioned here and sold stone. At the end of the 19th century, this company was one of the largest companies in this industry in the whole city of Krakow. But during the war, this place was turned into labor camp. And just next to it, a labor and then later concentration camp was established, Plaszow concentration camp. So both areas, the Liban Quarry and the neighboring area, was transformed into campsites. In the Liban Quarry, mostly Polish and Ukrainian prisoners were held, and in Plaszow camp, and this is how the space looks like today, there were Jewish people held, brought from ghettos, from Krakow ghetto and the ghettos around the region. You can see now that the site of the former Plaszow concentration camp is now a vast green area, and also functions as a leisure area for the inhabitants of Krakow. This is also one of the places where the Schindler's List was filmed. Actually, the film set representing the camp, the Plaszow camp, was filmed in the Liban Quarry, so just next to the original camp. What you just saw were fragments of the Schindler's List, as well as some archival materials representing the Plaszow concentration camp. The camp was established in 1942 in the area of two Jewish cemeteries. And when the Schindler's List was filmed in the Liban Quarry, they built a film set there, and the remains of the set are still there, and it's very easy to mistake them for actual remains of the camp. This is actually the area of the Plaszow concentration camp. In the 1944, the forced labor camp was transformed into a concentration camp. Transports from liquidated ghettos came here, and executions were also carried out, and this is one of the execution sites. Only while working on this tour, I found out that before and during the war, my relatives used to live just next to the camp. Among them, my beloved aunt that used to take me for long trekking tours in the mountains each summer when I was a child. She must have been 7 when the war broke out, old enough to have vivid memories of that time. She had never talked about it, neither to me nor to any members of my family. And as you can see, currently, the site of the former Plaszow concentration camp is at the center of the heated debate because it is a vast green area used by people who want to come and ride bicycles, have a picnic, or just meet with friends, or run, go jogging, walk their dogs. The debate concerns the future of the area. This huge green area is used for recreation, but the material remains of the terrible past of this place are still there, including human remains, both of people buried in the cemeteries and those who were murdered there. This aspect of that space was the main topic of a project that was done during the previous edition of the festival, and this is called the medicinal plants of Plaszow. This project was done in collaboration with the Social Welfare Center in Podgórze, and the idea was to focus on what is actually there in the space of the former Plaszow concentration camp, meaning the plants. Apparently, there are many plants growing there that has medicinal properties. And you can see the plants over here because as a result of the project, a garden was created, a garden of medicinal plants of Krakow. And just next to the plants, you can see an exhibition dealing with the complexity of the site. A current vision for a monument in Plaszow, in the site of the former Plaszow concentration camp, provoked strong reactions, as it would result in inevitable loss of the current character of the site. On the other hand, the area of the former concentration camp remains one of the very few post-camp sites in Poland that has not yet been secured and commemorated. Tensions appear between memory and contemporary uses of the space, which on one hand, for contemporary inhabitants of the densely built-up city of Krakow, constitutes an attractive space for satisfying their needs. On the other hand, whose topography hides material traces of past violence, constituting a kind of living archive, with the history of genocide archived in the living vegetation. According to Jewish religious law, the halacha, everything that grows at the grave or around it belongs to the dead. So we should consider this space belonging to them. They have their gardens there. And I feel this is really crucial for understanding what the district actually is, what it was not to be, and what it might be, and what it might become. The district where I was born was home and is home to the two largest sites of extermination of Jews in Krakow, the ghetto and the Plaszow concentration camp. The space of Plaszow, similarly to the spaces of Podgórze, brings together contemporary dilemmas and questions about how urban space should look like and function. Not only the area of Plaszow, but the entire district seems to be at another moment of transition, deciding on what it will and will not be. These types of dilemmas may, above all, require attention to complex needs of all actors involved in the process, as well as maybe developing new site-specific approaches that may require letting go the traditional forms and languages of commemoration in favor of working with new strategies. In times of climate crisis, we should look for new ways of using and developing our cities and also our commemoration with respect both to the past but also to our future. Podgórze provokes questions of how we live in the cities, what is the role of and importance of memory in an urban space, how to find balance between memory and history, the life of local community and globalist tourism. This is an article that I've mentioned at the beginning, a city that was not to be. So I feel we can discuss about how the past resonates with the life of the district and how it influences the spaces we inhabit.
Thank you very much, Ola, as we're closing the video. I will invite people to put their questions. Some started to put their comments and questions in the chat, but also if you would like to say something or contribute. Some people been in Krakow many times, in Podgórze, some live there or live in Poland and would like to contribute. Please indicate, write in the chat that you would like to say something, and we will invite you to unmute yourself and share your thoughts. So maybe let's start. Michael did answer some of it, but perhaps Danrith, that is also working in Holocaust history in the United States, is asking about signs on buildings in Pivna 27 to note the history. And maybe you can speak more generally about signs on buildings and what is on the sign. Is it just one line? Is there just a date? What do you and how can you commemorate a building?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And I see there are many interesting questions and comments in the chat. So thank you so much. I couldn't see that while I was talking, so only now I'm going through that. And I think this is a brilliant question, because many of the less known to the history of the ghetto buildings are not commemorated with a sign or anything. So we feel like that should be maybe that there should be signs, but they are there. So we have the ghetto trails that you saw on the building next to where the ghetto wall and the ghetto gate were. So this is like a memory trail. So there is like a path that you can take if you're visiting Krakow, and you can discover the history of the ghetto. But let's say it focuses on the highlights, I would say, of this history of that history of the area. And we were also discussing that with Tali actually once, that we would love to see more signs, also talking about less known and maybe less significant from the just historical perspective, but very significant, for example, from the social life perspective, or memory activism perspective places. And I believe that we should also think about new strategies of implementing such strategies in the urban space, because obviously if you want to put a plaque on a building, you have to have all sorts of official permits. So there is also this negotiation happening, is it significant enough? Is this story significant enough? If there's any material trace, because if not, so maybe this is not so significant. So I feel we could experiment with different guerrilla solutions to that, and even maybe include, as we were once discussing, QR codes, or maybe some not that visible and not that strong signs that allow people to discover the history if they are interested. And I think this is something that still has to be done in Podgórze, because there are many places very important for the Jewish history of Krakow and the ghetto history that remain, let's say, invisible if you don't know the history.
Absolutely, and there is a little bit of development of this idea that I'll share with you in a minute. But lovely to see Stephen Muir, that is a professor of music at Leeds University, and he said that his choir from the University of Leeds sang in that church, your Walt Disney kind of castle church, that many years ago, including 1 or 2 Jewish music items from his research. And that must have been absolutely amazing. And a lot of people are thanking you and so on. But let's go to Carolyn's question. And she is going into the issue of Plaszow concentration camp. And what is the problem? Can you elaborate a little bit about the memorial? What are some of the plans? And we will have another, just for Plaszow, a virtual tour. I think the date is the 16th or 15th of February. But if you can maybe enter us into this issue.
Yeah, and actually, I think this is great that you're gonna have the tour around Plaszow, because this is a magnificent tour. So I hope you'll all be able to participate in it. So the issue and the problem with the campsite is that the city and the Museum of Krakow decided to commemorate this space, and it was like expected to be commemorated for many years, because this is one of the very few sites that hasn't been commemorated, let's say, properly in comparison to other campsites in Poland. But the architectural design for the space includes like radical transformation of the space. And now we are at the very interesting moment, and also Michael Rubenfeld from the festival, who is present here, can also jump in and contribute to that, to my answer, because like we are in an interesting moment, because with the festival, we are trying to negotiate again with the city and with the museum how this space will be transformed. But the original design included the radical transformation of the area, meaning like building a museum, building the whole infrastructure, also an infrastructure for the tourists like that could come. But for example, this design included cutting down 380 trees, which is a lot. And this was the main source of the discontent among the inhabitants of the area, because Krakow, for those of you who haven't been there, it's a very densely built up city. So there are very little green areas in the city. And this is one of the very few of them. So this has like very, like strong consequences for all the people that are living around it. And I think like the process of also consultations that were done by the city and by the museum, it was controversial, and there were some mistakes made on the way. So at the end of the process, the city and the museum were like antagonized the inhabitants, and there was this growing antagonism and conflict between the two sides, while the inhabitants were saying that they are not against the commemoration itself, they are just against the design that was proposed. So this is really like, this is the tough part, because the design was done and it was accepted by the city and by the museum, and it was paid for, obviously. And these were public money. So now it's not that easy to just throw that away. But at the same time, this design is kind of already old. I don't remember how many years it was designed, but already a while ago. And it is also, I think, a bit outdated, also in terms of like the commemorative strategies. And there was no process that actually included the potential of this space as a green area that might remain green while being also a respectful commemoration. But nobody actually discussed that in that way. So the tension was growing and growing and growing. And now we are at the moment where the city is sort of opening up for negotiating again, but we don't know yet what will become out of it. I'm just checking if Michael maybe would like to, if Michael is still here with us, maybe he would like to jump in.
Michael is with us. I see him, but he's not on video, so maybe he just...
Yeah, like if he doesn't feel like jumping.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is.
I don't really have much specifically to add necessarily, other than actually one of the festivals actually just gotten a grant, a Norway grant, to start a project where we're going to be working with local youth, local sort of Boy and Girl Scouts, and training them to work interview and work with the local community, because we're trying to operate as a bridge between this sort of official government-based organization and the local inhabitants, to try and actually create more synergy, to try to create a more inclusive environment, to try and give voice and a more collaborative spirit around the future of this space.
Thank you, Michael. And as I said, we will have the tour of the whole area of the Plaszow concentration camp. It's a large, large area. There were up to 30,000 prisoners in that concentration camp. So you will see much more than what you just saw from bird view and sort of an introduction to that site. Ola, Gladwin Lehman is asking about the ghetto wall that, of course, it's very unique when you look at other ghettos in Poland or in Central or Eastern Europe. The ghetto wall was very elaborate. So can you talk a little bit about this ghetto wall, about who built it, how long did it take? What was the idea around this ghetto wall?
Yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, the form of it is actually really surprising, and I think this is something that we tend to focus on when we see it, because at first, as I said, the ghetto was fenced with the barbed wire, and then in 1941, I believe like Poles were appointed to build the wall, and I think it was built quite quickly. I don't remember like how much time it actually took to build the wall. It had 4 gates. So the gate that you saw during the walk was just one of them. And the wall was surrounding the ghetto from like different sides. And there were 4 gates that were letting some people, obviously select people, in and out. The 2 remaining parts, the most famous remaining parts, are the ones that you saw on Lwowska and Libanowskiego Street. And unfortunately, I know nothing about the history behind the form of the wall, because what we know, for example, the ghetto wall in Warsaw looked very different, and it wasn't that decorative, and also ironically comparable to Jewish tombstones, so to Matzevot. So but unfortunately, this is the story that I don't know, and I'm not sure if it's known. But if there is, I know that there are experts in the room as well. So maybe there is somebody who'd like to say something about it.
Jonathan, do you want to add? Jonathan Weber, maybe? No? You're just listening today.
Yeah, I was thinking about one of the experts. Yeah, but
I mean, I can add a very little. I really don't want to take from your absolutely fantastic presentation, but I think just to say that the history of the Krakow ghetto is complicated. It's not like other ghettos in Poland, certainly not like the Warsaw ghetto, and Krakow became the capital city of the general government, so that is the seat of the Nazis, and in a way you have to see that ghetto as complicated, a compromise. In the beginning, they deport many of the Jews from Krakow to the countryside, then they decide to build a ghetto, but it's a very small ghetto, as Ola said, about 15,000, few more later, and very small area. And being the capital and sort of the seat of the new Nazi hierarchy, there is a kind of beautification idea of this is, they don't even call it a ghetto, it's a Jewish quarter. And it's, again, I'll not go into it, but we can talk about Theresienstadt as well as that kind of idea of hiding a little bit of what is done in Krakow, a little bit as well, but I'll not go into it. It is a very, very complex, sorry, maybe we'll do a webinar next year about Krakow in the ghetto. There are really beautiful ideas from Dunrith, and maybe you can think about it together with us about the issue of memory. So she says, is commemoration the right word? Is that not too harsh? What about honoring the past? You know, so maybe when you deal with memory of all those places, you know, how do you deal with it? And maybe I'll read what she's saying: irony between honoring the past and determination not to forget the horrors of the past, preserving the past. So maybe speak a little bit about that tension between all those things.
Yeah, I feel this is like the whole amazing, great subject. And I'm also like thinking a lot about that, because I feel there is, on one hand, we observe this like global rush to commemorate, and we observe that everywhere. And I kind of agree with you that maybe commemoration sounds too positive in a way, and maybe, yeah, we can use remembrance as well, and then maybe also honoring the past. And I've learned a lot while I started traveling across Eastern and Southern Poland when I started working for a foundation that is commemorating and locating uncommemorated burials of the Jewish victims of the Holocaust. And then I've learned that maybe we shouldn't be so focused on like building monuments, because like what I observed there is that what is much more important is like discovering the place and the knowledge that is like both archived in the landscape but also in the local community, and work with that and maybe co-create monuments with them. And sometimes it might result in something that we don't consider a traditional monument at all, but it might be very successful in actually bringing up the memory and opening up the knowledge, and also like creating a space for remembrance that you talk about. And I've learned that this is far more inspiring for me to think in these terms, because very often, and I saw that in many little villages in Poland, there is somebody coming and he or she brings a monument, and this is something that we all consider like a right thing to do, and I agree with that. But when the connection with the local social tissue is also missing, sometimes this monument is not actually part of local memory culture, so there is no remembrance growing around it. Which I think is crucial for the past to actually be actively remembered and be honored. So I feel this is something that, like, for me now is it's an inspiration for how to think about monuments. And also sometimes you can start, and I've tried that in many villages in Poland. I've tried the strategy of like starting with something little, and we've started creating wooden matzevot that we place in the sites of burial sites. And this is inspired by the pre-war wooden matzevot that you could like come across in the pre-war Jewish cemeteries in the Eastern Poland. And apparently this has proven to be extremely successful, because we've already marked 60 sites, the uncommemorated, unmarked sites of Jewish burials of the Holocaust victims. And only in one village, the matzeva was just relocated. It wasn't destroyed. It wasn't devastated. It was just relocated, just like a few meters. But like in all other places, we saw candles, that people bring candles, people bring flowers, people bring stones, some people come to pray. And in 5 places, these matzevot already turned into permanent commemorations, so permanent monuments. So I think this might be a strategy, and we are still experimenting with that. That is much more successful, because we don't start with the commemoration as a vision of like a monument or a structure, like a commemorative structure, but we start with something that provokes memory practices or remembrance that then can result in a monument or something else. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that like opened up these stories in my head.
Yeah, and Denrith, feel free to unmute if you would like to extend on this very interesting ideas around memorials. Stephen Muir is asking, this question was very pertinent to my large music project. And I do recommend for people to go into the music project, because Stephen and colleagues unearthed amazing music that was also lost. This idea of how do you remember and how do you preserve is not only on memorials on the ground, but in the case of Stephen, it's with music and with cabaret and with prayers and with many other things. So I encourage you to look at the website. So he's asking, do we celebrate the musical achievements of musicians who were murdered? Do we commemorate it? Should we be playing music? So I don't know, Stephen, do you want to maybe unmute yourself and just maybe talk a little bit about it? And it will be a great way to, I think, you know, end the discussion.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. It's wonderful to see you, Telly, and see everybody else. And thank you for a really excellent presentation, really fascinating. I went to Krakow a long time ago, and it really brought back memories. Thank you. So yeah, the project that I coordinated was a very large international project, and as Telly said, we kind of unearthed sort of archaeology-wise, all sorts of manuscripts and things like that. But we had this constant niggle. Should we, you know, we might uncover some music that by most people's judgment was mediocre, but should we celebrate it nevertheless because of its situation, its circumstance, or should we put the music out there without explaining its backstory, so to speak, and let people judge it in its own right? And we had lots of arguments about this, and I'm not sure we ever came to a definite conclusion. And it's the same for all types of art and other things as well. So I think I came down on the side that actually all of this music is important. All of these artifacts are important because they, by their very survival and existence still now, they speak of some kind of historical reparation. Of course, that's not possible completely. But for me, working on this music and getting it recorded and things like that, which I'm still doing, it's a way of putting some historical wrongs as right as they could be, even though they can't be fully put right, if you see what I mean. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. Ola, with thoughts about other, like music and other forms of memory, perhaps?
Yeah, I think this is fascinating, and thank you so much for sharing the story of your project and also the debates that you've had. And it also reminds me of another project we did with Festival, that we used performance as a way to interact with the space of the Plaszow site. And I feel both music and performance are very powerful because they are temporary, so they are ephemeral, but in a sense they tend to gather people together, which I think is very beautiful and also very powerful when we talk about memory. And I kind of agree with you that I would agree with the fact that we should probably preserve and present whatever we have, because so much was lost. But at the same time, I feel like this performative forms might be an interesting solution also for this contested or difficult heritage sites, because it allows people to gather around and experience something together, which I think brings up all sorts of emotions that are really important for people to feel connected to the history and the site. And we experimented with it was like a movement performance at the site of the Plaszow concentration camp, and it has proven to be actually really accessible for people, because originally we thought that maybe this would be too sophisticated for the neighbors of the area or something, but apparently they liked it a lot, and also it allowed them to actually be in the space and be reflexive in that space, which was a completely different experience from the experience they had when they just walked the dog there.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, and especially in Plaszow, where you have all those, the runners and the bikers and the walking the dogs. Yeah, yeah. So we're almost out of time. So if Carolyn can unmute herself and very, very quickly ask the last question, and then we will close.
Okay, great. I just want to say, I think it's really impressive that you're getting people to participate. I think that's really kind of heartwarming to find that people are placing their own memorials or their own stones or doing something. That was the one thing I wanted to say. And the other thing is on Stephen's point about music. I think sometimes you've got to see that for me, it's about the creativity of the people, that they actually managed to make some music in such difficult circumstances. So sometimes the issue about merit of how sophisticated the music is. Well, in a concentration camp, you don't have the resources that someone like sitting in a university would. So you can't judge it by the same academic standards. That's my feeling. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ola, last word before we wrap up, perhaps from your side?
Yeah, I know we have probably 2 minutes left, so I want to thank you all for your comments and questions, and also for all the interesting comments and discussions that happen in the chat. And I'm really inspired by your contributions. And Tali, I'm very honored that I could be part of this meeting, and thank you so much for inviting me.
And absolutely, thank you. I think everyone all deserve really a round of applause. It was very emotional. It was very informative. It really got us thinking in different way. To everyone from Festival, Michael, Magda, Adam, everyone. I know that Luke was here. So everyone behind the scenes, just the work you're doing is important. It's different. It makes us all think. I've been in Podgórze with Maud. I've been in Podgórze 20 times, 30 times, and there are buildings that I've never seen. And I would love you or Michael to take me around the next time I'm in Poland, because I'm sure there is so much more that can be seen there. So really wonderful. And just to thank everyone, every one of you for coming to all our webinars or some of our webinars, and just for your support in this very challenging year. And thank you for the Holocaust and Genocide Center team for all your wonderful, wonderful work. I can just wish you all a wonderful holiday season. Rest well, keep safe, keep healthy, and we will see you in 2021. Join us on the 14th of January, 2021 for our first event, and that will be with University College London and the Sir Martin Gilbert Learning Centre. And it is, we found our long lost brethren, Jewish and Christian army chaplains at the liberation of Bergen-Belsen. And it will be with the second generation chaplain, Jewish chaplain, and with a researcher of this history. So thank you very much for joining us. Good night, be safe. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you.